Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Indians program from Geriatric Psychiatry from NIMHANS. Today, we have with us Dr. Debanjan Banerjee, who is second year, right now in third year DM Geriatry. He would be presenting on late onset psychosis and overview. And we have Dr. G. Venkat Subramanian, sir, who is professor here at Department of Psychiatry at NIMHANS, Bangalore. You would also have listened to him in Weiser neuromodulation in our brain stimulation of Indians. He has, among the various accolades, he has also received Swarna Jayanti Fellowship in the field of science and Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize in the field of science, among various accolades. We welcome you, sir. Sir, can you have a few words before we go on to the actual presentation by Dr. Debanjan, sir?
Yeah. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's program, where we will be learning more about late onset psychosis and overview. Dr. Debanjan will be presenting for about 40 minutes or so, and his presentation will cover several aspects of late onset psychosis, starting from the clinical presentation to a bit of neurobiology and then treatment aspect. At the same time, looking into differential diagnosis. So, and then we can have a discussion. Some of the clinical challenges in handling late onset psychosis will also be addressed by Dr. Debanjan, and hopefully we can have more discussions on that. So with these introductory comments, I request Dr. Debanjan to start his presentation.
Thank you, sir. I'm audible.
Yes, Dr. Debanjan, you're audible. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Very good afternoon to one and all. As sir has already mentioned, what we are going to do in the next 30-40 minutes is to have an overview of all forms of late life psychosis, a major part of which will be centered around late onset schizophrenia and very late onset schizophrenia. To start off, this will be the outline of the presentation. We'll first try and see whether late life or late onset, however you call it, is really any different from the usual psychosis that we talk about. What are the risks that can predispose to late life psychosis, the different constructs, the different forms of psychosis in late life, the cardinal differences, and obviously the challenges in management, and then conclude with what can be the take-home points. To start off, when the term schizophrenia is usually discussed or has been discoursed in academics, mainly the typical picture that comes up is of a younger person. And that has been there across classificatory systems in various presentations, discussions, and even in the management challenges. So late onset psychosis or late life psychosis, be it in depression or psychosis, these two terms are, or geriatric psychosis, as is often interchangeably used. The subtle difference that exists is, if we just tell late life, it can mean that a person who had a psychotic episode before a certain cutoff age, we'll come to it later, let's say 60 or 55, could have had it even before. However, when we tell late onset, the very onset of psychosis has happened after that specified cutoff age. For all purposes in the presentation, we'll talk about late onset psychosis, the form of psychosis that happens after the certain cutoff age, as well as we'll also see that if people have been having chronic schizophrenia or chronic psychosis before, let's say 60 years, how does the clinical picture change? And for many years, it has been discussed and debated, as in the earlier presentation of late life depression, that whether this is a separate neurobiological construct altogether. The debate continues. We are here just to increase it further. These are some of the familiar faces which many of you have been seeing. There have been evolution of the concept of paraphrenia, literally meaning beside mind. Now, when the concept was first introduced in 1863 by Carl Kalbo, who also conceptualized catatonia, it was really not for a late onset, but it was by paraphrenia, he meant a transient psychotic stage that can happen either in adolescence or in late life, which he termed as paraphrenia senilis. Subsequently, in 1912, Kraepelin actually used the term paraphrenia to mean a somewhat similar construct to dementia praecox, with the exception that it has predominant positive symptoms, very less of negative or affective symptoms, has a relative preserved personality, and is remitted easily. So these were the terms that were first used to describe paraphrenia. And it was challenged and debated in the 1920 to 30 by mainly William Mayer and Ross. But subsequently, when in 1932 onwards, the seminal work of Manfred Blöhler, the son of Eugen Blöhler, conceptualized late onset psychosis or late onset schizophrenia as we know today. What are the importance of studying psychotic symptoms in later life? Now, you'll see that there is a lot of overlap in these terminologies and the disturbances between late life depression as well as psychosis. There is obviously a big time diagnostic dilemma, increased caregiver distress, a lot of behavioral disturbances which can further increase the vicious cycle of elder abuse and neglect because of poor understanding of the complaints. And as always, a lot of it can even be attributed to just age or aging, like any other disorders. There is increased risk of institutionalization and hospitalization, greater morbidity, of course, associated with a lot of sensory deficits. And like late life depression is also associated with a cognitive burden. Now, mainly when we talk about psychosis today, we'll be focusing on either the schizophrenia-like psychosis or delusional disorders or substance use psychosis. We'll very briefly be glancing on psychotic depression, but will not go into the detail as it has already been covered earlier in late life depression presentation. Now, the age at what it can be called late or very late has, been debated over the last few decades. The common presumption that we usually do at various places is either 45 and 65 or 40 and 60. The age criteria that is being shown here was given by the International Consensus Group on Late Life Schizophrenia, led by Howard and his team. The age can vary from 40 to 45, but between that to 60 to 65, it is considered to be late onset. And above 65, it's considered to be very late onset, but that in various papers or literature, it has even been considered 50, 80, or 60, 80, and so on. Now, what's important to understand is that psychosis or psychotic symptoms in general in elderly or patients or older adults can have a very high proportion. And in majority of the cases, it is related to either neurocognitive disorders, which include dementia, Parkinson's, other forms of dementia, non-AD dementias, and of course, psychotic depression. So many times when you do a cross-sectional examination, as various studies have done, when you see a cross-sectional prevalence, then the psychotic symptoms that are picked up most might actually be attributed to a secondary cause rather than being a primary psychosis itself. So when we talk about primary psychosis, like any other psychotic disorders, it can include schizophrenia, schizophrenia-like psychosis, delusional disorder, brief psychotic disorder, acute and transient psychosis, bipolar disorders with that is mania as well as depression with psychotic symptoms, psychotic unipolar depression. And secondary means that obviously there is something else that is leading to the psychotic symptoms rather than a psychotic syndrome, which is dementia again, delirium, which is very, very common, a lot of perceptual abnormalities, disturbances, disorders of thought can happen together with clouding of consciousness in delirium. What is very important, and I'll come to it probably time and again throughout my presentation, is in older adults, as the age increases, two things keep coming up. One is polypharmacy, combination of a lot of medications being added from doctor to doctor. Many times we commonly miss the complete list of medications. So contribution of polypharmacy, drug interactions can contribute to psychosis, and a lot of medical conditions, comorbid medical conditions, including autoimmune conditions, connective tissue disorders, early states of neoplasm, can contribute to psychotic symptoms again. And the other important factor which has been increasing over the last few years has been prescription abuse and misuse and iatrogenic burden, which can lead to psychosis. Commonly, if we see, schizophrenia in general restricts itself to younger ages. Substance-induced can happen fairly in all ages. So-called organic attributions or delirium dementia will predominantly have a higher age preponderance. Both the articles, one in almost quite long back in 2007 and a very recent systematic review by Swen et al. In 2019, shows that there is almost 1 in 4 lifetime risk that of in general psychotic symptoms. So 23% of older adult population will experience psychotic symptoms at some time of their life. Most important contributing cause being dementia. Second to that, psychotic depression, unipolar. Second to that, schizophrenia. And then finally, bipolar disorders. These are the various studies which have shown quite a varied incidence and prevalence rates. One of the important studies was the epidemiological catchment area study, which showed that the prevalence of schizophrenia between 45 to 65 years was 1%, which is same as the normal prevalence that we talk about, and greater than 65 years is 0.3%. So it does decrease compared to the adult population. However, with increasing age, the clinical pictures changes significantly. So many times, even historically, when paranoia has been used as a word or paranoid ideation has been used, it was termed for isolated, probably monosymptomatic delusions in elderly, which are often either missed during the routine assessment or can be attributed to either delirium or cognitive disorders. However, in people who are hospitalized in the older adults, there can be a significant proportion increase when you see the prevalence of late onset psychosis. However, again, if you assess the cognitive status post the remission of the psychotic symptoms, it gives a clearer picture that which disorder was in the primary state. So as I was mentioning earlier, these are the frequency of the common disorders followed by the ones which are less common. If you see that schizophrenia spectrum disorders and delusional disorder together probably forms the least common reason why psychotic symptoms can be observed in older adults. Now coming to the most important part of it. So besides frailty and vulnerability to stressors, just to recapitulate, frailty has been conceptualized as the sum total biological and psychosocial vulnerability that a person conquers with age as well as time. Now, that can range from psychosocial vulnerabilities right up to molecular degradation and apoptosis and various dimensions. So, besides the structural and functional changes that we see in the human brain with age, there can be social isolation, neglect. Like late life depression, psychosocial factors play a very, very important role in late life psychosis. Sensory deficits, I'll come later to how hearing loss and visual loss, or just not loss, but the spectrum of decrease in the acuity of both vision and hearing can have a significant bearing on psychotic symptoms in older age. Medical comorbidities and polypharmacy that I already mentioned before, age-related changes in how drugs are dealt with by the body, comorbid illnesses, often there might be a psychotic prodrome for a long time before really we see any cognitive symptoms from appearing. Specific changes in the limbic system and the fronto-subcortical circuits, and obviously the neurotransmitter changes that are associated with aging, again, which forms a part of the frailty. What is important to recognize here is sensory deprivation. If somebody is isolated, if somebody doesn't really stay in a very well lit, clean room, has a chronic stressor, especially somebody who is vulnerable or is predisposed to a psychotic diathesis, might have a late life psychosis even in the absence of so-called genetic risk factors if the stress is paramount. There are papers which talk about how acute stress reactions can also present mimicking psychosis in older adults who face significant grief, trauma, or bereavement. Coming to the part of assessing or understanding as clinicians, I started off by mentioning that diagnostic dilemma is probably one of the most important factors that we have to encounter when we are dealing with late life psychosis. So keeping in mind the neurodegenerative disorders, depression, any kind of systemic illness, prescription abuse, neglect, and substance abuse or withdrawal. Now, I'll stress on this fact that there are no so-called specific signs for late life psychotic disorders. Hence, it is always better from the clinical point of view to keep a broad differential when we are considering any case of first appearance of late life psychosis. I'm sure all of you will be familiar with this, that the time to onset of psychotic symptoms are very important in deciding as to what will be your approach to management. Hypothetically, let's take the example of a 75-year-old gentleman who didn't have a family history of psychosis, never had any psychiatric problems throughout his life, and one fine day after getting up in the morning, suddenly starts having vivid visual hallucinations and comes to you for evaluation. Now, obviously, in this case, the pointers would be total absence of family history, but family history can be absent in most cases of late onset psychosis, but a very, very sudden, abrupt onset, which might or might not be associated with neurological signs, especially focal neurological signs. The way he presents to you, whether the consciousness is clouded or not, whether it is very discrete, clear-cut positive symptoms, or it is associated with, a very non-specific, non-systematized psychotic symptoms, and obviously, history of substance use and prescription use. So the few pointers that might guide you towards thinking that it might not be a primary psychotic disorder of the later life might be focal neurological signs, very sudden and abrupt onset, presence of associated features like head injury or neuroinfections, presence of substance use, and obviously, the way the person presents to you, in the sense it might be very, very dramatic, and especially when there is non-auditory modality hallucinations. So when we see a person presenting with cognitive impairment, there might be more of visual modality involved. The delusions can be fragmented. there will be more of delusional misidentification of misinterpretation rather than more of monosymptomatic delusions, clear-cut hallucinations in otherwise clear mindset, or predominant auditory delusions in primary psychosis. Now, again, I will reiterate the fact that these are not watertight compartments, but there can be often significant clinical overlap. It's up to our clinical discretion to really understand when and how we approach a case-by-case basis of late onset psychosis. So coming to the eternal debate, is early and late onset different? In DSM-3, it was made mandatory that you cannot diagnose a person with schizophrenia if he or she is above 45 years of age. Subsequent to the debate and discourse, DSM-3R revised it and said that the criteria for diagnosis can be extended by 20 more years. Subsequently, the age criteria has not been there in the other DSMs. ICD-9 called subcoded the paranoid states, one of which being late paraphrenia, which was again according to the Kraepelinian concept of later age psychosis with preserved personality disorders. However, as we all know, in ICD-10, there is no specific age-related classification for any of the psychotic symptoms. And finally, in DSM-5, the subtypes have been removed and it's become a dimensional disorder. However, still, there is no specific mention of a late onset subtype of schizophrenia in the classificatory systems as of now. Coming to the international consensus group that was formed and which worked for a long time, there are a couple of publications, and it's also mentioned in the Oxford Textbook of Old Age Psychiatry. Late life schizophrenia is greater than 60 years, very late life, and late onset is greater than 40. Any form of schizophrenia that happens or occurs for the first time after 45 years is considered to be late onset according to their initial paper in 1997, which was revised to the 40 and the 60 age criteria in their subsequent classification. Now the prevalence, as I was mentioning already earlier, it's with the studies show that it's increasing. More and more people live up to a certain age in which the psychotic symptoms can be seen, more at probably after 60s, 70s, and 80s. And it might also be contributed by the general increase in the life expectancy. I'll skip this part as I had already covered it. Coming to the studies from 1990s to, there have been more studies post 20th century related to the late life psychosis and schizophrenia. So the prevalence has been actually shown to be increasing, and it's near to 0.3 to 0.4% in case of very late onset schizophrenia, and around 1% in late onset schizophrenia. What many studies have conceptualized as late onset psychosis has only considered schizophrenia. So it is not very clear whether the psychosis part had taken other psychotic spectrum disorders as well, but majority of the studies have considered schizophrenia with diagnosis specific for schizophrenia. Like in general, in young onset cases, what we see, there are non-specific structural changes in the brain with increased ventricular volumes and increase in generalized atrophy. But the proportion of patients whom we see the structural changes in old age is obviously higher. And functional imaging has also shown hypoperfusion in frontal temporal areas, decreased functional connectivity between the default mode network and the subcortical structures, decreased functional connectivity between the frontal and the limbic areas, and specifically decreased functional connectivity in the left front temporal and medial temporal structures. The structural changes have been the most consistent findings so far in terms of imaging. Deep matter hyperintensities are much more related to late life depression and the concept of vascular depression. However, a few studies have also shown a link between white matter hyperintensities and structural changes in very late onset schizophrenia. Now, this is a comparative table that has been adapted from one of the very recent studies, a narrative review by Tampi et al. 2019. I'd specifically like to stress on the female preponderance, and this has led people to theorize and hypothesize that estrogen might play an important role with late life psychosis. Cognitive burden might be more in very late onset schiz, which is again debated by the fact that probably there has already been an age-related change, and hence, the entire psychotic process just hastens the cognitive worsening. There is increased risk of tardive dyskinesia and other antipsychotic related risk as the age progresses. And even though schizophrenia is one of the psychiatric syndromes to be considered to have a very important and significant genetic contribution, usually in late onset and very late onset psychosis, the contribution of genetics has been traditionally considered to be low, and structural abnormalities are much more common. This is one of the suggested reads, as I was mentioning earlier, by Swen et al. They have done updated systematic review, including 27 articles from 2000 to almost for over 20 years. And they have also come to the conclusion that there have been significant inconsistencies in how you define late life psychosis, the criteria, whether you use a completely different criteria or stick to the classical classificatory systems, and what are the differences. They have also mentioned that the studies have relatively smaller sample sizes, have inconsistent age-related criteria, and have a significant overlap with dementia. When a lot of patients who have been included as primary psychosis in the end have turned out in follow-up studies to have a full-blown neurocognitive disorder-like picture. This paper also comments about a psychopathology, and for late onset psychosis, there is lesser disorganization, more of social withdrawal, reduced hospitalization, predominant positive symptoms, more of persecutory delusions, and less affective flattening, which is again a negative symptom. People who have delusions have lesser insight, relatively greater paranoia with increased conviction, which increases with chronicity. And even though head-to-head comparative studies have not been done, but they have lesser cognitive impairment compared to people who have chronic schizophrenia, which started in young age, though the social cognition and short-term memory have been affected more in the neuropsychological tests in people with late life psychosis, in late life schizophrenia. In neurobiology-wise, the structural changes, the white matter integrity is compromised both in arcuate and the uncinate fasciculus. There are non-specific structural changes of the limbic system, increased total white matter volume, and as I mentioned, decreased functional connectivity and perfusion in bilateral temporal lobes, which again correlates with the fact that these are the sites of genesis of auditory hallucinations. Coming to another such good read, a critical review by Ash 2017 has incorporated these particular areas in the genesis of late life psychotic symptoms. And among that are the left orbitofrontal cortex, the right and the left amygdala, the right superior temporal gyrus, bilateral parahippocampal gyrus, and the left hippocampus, out of which amygdala, left hippocampus, and orbitofrontal cortex are also the regions implicated in the genesis of late life depression, especially the vascular depression and the depression dysexecutive syndrome. And it has been debated in this paper that whether a lot of so-called late life psychosis are actually a psychotic predominant presentation of depressive disorders or not, and whether they need to be subtyped or subcategorized as a totally different diagnostic construct. Certain theories that have been traditionally used to explain contribution of estrogen, overlap between schiz and mood disorders of later life, changes in the subtypes and the availability of dopamine receptors in the limbic cortex. And it has been classically shown that very late onset schizophrenia has relationship with immigration status, which again brings in the concept of psychosocial abnormalities. And finally, whether white matter abnormalities have something to do with the cognitive dysfunction that sometimes we see in the persistent psychotic symptoms in old age. The premorbid educational, occupational, psychosocial functioning is less impaired in late life onset schizophrenia, which I mentioned before. And this probably has quite a significant relationship. So in long back in the 1976, paraphrenia was related by Cooper to hearing loss, especially the degree of hearing loss and if it is unilateral or bilateral. In general, in clinical practice, we end up seeing a lot of patients who have very fluctuating or monosymptomatic psychotic symptoms, who have, uh, you know, it started off with almost like pseudo hallucinations when they first experience their hearing loss. But over period of time, even though the hearing loss was corrected or partially corrected, the psychotic symptoms persisted but responded very well to very low dose of antipsychotics. In another study, it was shown that almost 30%, 30 to 40% people have comorbid hearing loss up to any degree, mostly sensory neural. And like the very concept of subvocalization or corollary discharge that is involved in the genesis or neurobiological understanding of hallucinations, it has also, and with the involvement of the superior temporal gyrus both structurally and functionally in the studies, there have been a continued discourse if the involvement of hearing loss leads to certain functional changes in the auditory areas of the brain, which can subsequently lead to the genesis of delusions and hallucinations in the elderly. However, it is imperative to understand that most hearing impaired elderly do not develop psychopathology. So it's not that every person with hearing loss will develop psychosis, but in people who have psychotic symptoms, correcting hearing impairment, which is often not done, can be one of the very salient features of management. So again, just to revise, more of visual, tactile, and olfactory hallucinations, but again, you have to keep the concept of organicity in mind. Predominant delusions of reference, paranoia, misidentification, religion. There are two other common things which are seen in elderly people, what we call as the sense of presence. If you remember, that chapter on fish, which talks about sense of presence and gives example of someone sensing a ghost coming behind, and false imposter syndrome, which is also common in psychosis and dementia, when a person thinks that somebody else is, as an imposter, is residing somewhere else in his home and is not seen. And delusions of misidentification, which can include both Capgras and Fregoli, and less likely to have formal thought disorders, catatonic symptoms, and negative symptoms. In terms of neuropsych impairment, even though it is less common than people who have young onset chronic schiz, there is still more of impairment in executive functions and short-term memory, especially in people who have long-standing or repeated episodes of late life psychosis. Typically, that paper by Tampi et al. Mentions that when you talk about that patient with late onset schizophrenia, most likely it's a female with fewer or no children, which increases estrogen exposure, having intrusive characteristics or paranoid traits, must have been quietly psychotic because the symptoms have not caused significant dysfunction, and there might be associated abuse or neglect. There is some cognitive decline in impairment in activities of daily living, but it is not clinically diagnosed dementia. But then again, this is a typical example which most of the times might not be clinically seen. As I mentioned earlier, that people who have been having schizophrenia even from the young onset, these are the changes that we see in age. Positive symptoms might improve. Negative symptoms has the less chance to improve with age. Depressive symptoms can often get exacerbated. Cognitive symptoms worsen. There might be adaptive functioning improvement with proper social support. There might be possible improvement of quality of life if the onset is towards the later part of the age spectrum, and the global outcome might not be very different compared to a young person having schizophrenia and continuing to older age versus somebody who has late onset. In general, however, the amount or the proportion of people who remit are much more higher. So neurodevelopmental factors might play a role in early onset schiz, as is the common hypothesis, versus late onset schizophrenia or psychosis, which are considered to be neurodegenerative. Usually, the treatment protocol, they respond to lower doses. Varying literature has been mentioned 10 to 25%. Maudsley mentions to give half of the adult doses. Atypical antipsychotics are considered to be safer. However, there can be metabolic versus extrapyramidal side effects in both types of antipsychotics. And it is most important to give the minimum possible pharmacological burden, because medical comorbidities, frailty, sensory deficits, and polypharmacy, sometimes going through every single prescription slip that the person is having, will be very important also to assess whether the person is taking multiple brands of the same medicines or alternate system of medications. Few very important points for the clinician's point of view. The first dictum is always to assume that something else is going on in a person, in an older adult presenting first time with psychotic symptoms, because most of the times it will be the case. Having a broad differential in mind, considering the possibility of organicity, especially as the pointers earlier that I discussed, going steady on antipsychotics, correcting sensory loss, avoiding multiple medications, start low, go slow approach. Sorry. The blood workup involves the complete blood count to check for inflammation, ESR, thyroid profile, electrolytes, because thyroid abnormalities, dyselectrolytemia, impaired diabetes, all can lead to presentation which can present as psychotic symptoms. Vitamin B12 deficiency, we have had a few cases of syphilis, neurosyphilis as well, who presented with psychotic symptoms, and various types of infection. Even though an imaging or autoimmune workup is not clinically routinely indicated in every single case, in some people who are presenting with a very abrupt onset, you do not really, or you have a clinical suspicion that something else might have been going on, or family members have not been able to provide proper information, it's very important to get an imaging, CT being that of a choice for the first time, because there might be a latent subdural hematoma, there might be history of head injury, or there actually might have been any neoplasm, though rare, which might contribute to the psychotic symptoms. Hello.
Yes, Devanjan.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There was some technical glitches. The power had gone off, so we just had to change the internet. Yeah. So just coming back to where I was, um, when we think of depot, it's obviously a safe alternative in case of people who have poor compliance. But then again, the dosing and both the initial and the maintenance need to be taken care of. Some papers mention that for people who are antipsychotic naive and presence for the first time above 60 years, it's always better to have a close monitoring ECG and a proper medical history before we go ahead with emergency sedations with haloperidol, olanzapine, or zuclopenthixol. In general, haloperidol and zuclopenthixol are options which are to be considered as the second line. However, there is no general consensus on it. Maudsley mentions that all injectables can be used, however, with appropriate caution and monitoring. A paper from our unit by Dr. Shivshankar had discussed about the utility of clozapine and the challenges faced in the elderly patients. It's obviously an effective choice, especially in secondary psychosis and considering psychosis in DLBD or Parkinson's. However, the usual side effect burden and the possibility of seizures, granulocytosis, and overt sedation needs to be considered and taken into caution. Cardiac safety is something which is for consideration. It's also a good read that I can suggest, which was in 2018 in the Asian Journal of Psychiatry. These are certain studies, mostly double-blinded randomized trials have been there for olanzapine and risperidone. And the duration of age of very late onset schizophrenia like psychosis, Atlas, was a very recent 3 arms randomized double blind trial, which had taken very late onset schizophrenia who had main aim was basically to see whether low dose and if we continue it for some time, whether the effectiveness persists. So it was placebo versus a 12 weeks phase versus people who have improved in 12 weeks to continue for 12 more weeks, that is total of 24 weeks. And it was done because an earlier single arm control study had found that amisulpride was safe indeed in the elderly. And the study showed that low dose amisulpride was effective with a reduction of BPRS by at least 14 points compared to 4 points in placebo after 12 weeks, which was maintained in the further continuation. However, it also took the reference of another study which was done in 2016, which saw that the receptor occupancy, dopamine receptor occupancy by even 100 mg amisulpride was as high as 80% in people above 70 years of age. And the authors cautioned about the careful monitoring and low dose initiation and gradual uptitrating of the medicines. Cognitive, behavioral, social skills training, especially functional recovery, focusing on functional recovery, the fast approach of schizophrenia, the adaptive skills training, and finally the CBT model that was proposed by Dr. Devavrat Kumar for delusions and hallucinations can be applied for elderly as well. It has been seen that more pragmatic approach, family psychoeducation, decreasing expressed emotions, helping the family understanding the illness, and correcting the other associated environmental or sensory issues help and complement the improvement by pharmacotherapy. In early onset schizophrenia, there is a significant proportion people who have hallucinations only symptoms. Coming to the secondary psychosis, in delirium, there will be predominant, both hyperactive as well as hypoactive, but predominant hyperactive delirium is associated with the the psychotic symptoms. Visual is significantly more than auditory, and paranoia. Associated with that, there will also be clouding of consciousness and impairment in global attention. In Alzheimer's, even though the rate of psychosis is quite high, it increases with increase in the duration of the illness. Again, visual is a predominant modality. People hallucinate about people from their past, about deceased relatives. There can be about inanimate objects. And as I was mentioning earlier, there are delusions of imposters, which are different from the monosymptomatic misidentification syndromes and often associated markedly with medical problems. One of the papers by Jeste and Finkel mentioned that psychosis in AD needs to have a presence of hallucinations or delusions for at least a month's duration. And it shouldn't be explained by delirium, by primary psychosis like schizophrenia, and other drug effects. The seminal finding from the KT-AD trial, I'm sure you all have heard about the KT trial. The subproportion of this trial in Alzheimer's patients found out that even though there was the time to discontinuation because of lack of efficacy was relatively better in olanzapine and risperidone compared to quetiapine, the main issue with all the three antipsychotics was discontinuation due to adverse effects. And that is something which is important to keep in mind. And we also have the regular black box warning by FDA on antipsychotic use in dementia. Not go into details of that because it has been already covered in pharmacotherapy in dementia. The start low, go slow approach applies. Medical monitoring and regular frequent monitoring in case of emergency or rapid neuroleptization is recommended. And finally, a lot of minor changes in the living and structural changes, environmental changes, like any other old age psychiatric conditions, can help a lot in late life psychosis. The classic differences in psychosis of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and schizophrenia are in its prevalence, in complex delusions, which can be more frequent in primary psychosis, in the first rank symptoms, in misidentification domain symptoms, need for maintenance antipsychotics, the duration, and of course, the dosing which is necessary. In general, in neurocognitive disorders, neurodegenerative disorders, the dosing is much more in a lower range. And psychosis of Parkinson's, clozapine is a great choice. And pimavanserin is a newer molecule, inverse agonist of 5-HT1 and 2, which have been recently studied and quite effective without the risk of extrapyramidal side effects. In general, vascular dementia or overlap with Alzheimer's can also contribute to the psychotic symptoms. Lewy body is known for its predisposition for psychotic symptoms and especially regulation in antipsychotic use of which can lead to increase in extrapyramidal effects. However, most texts mention that because of increased prevalence of AD, it's more higher chances in AD. And in Parkinson's disease, there can be even iatrogenic or medication-related causes. I had mentioned the differences clinically seen with primary psychosis before. In unipolar depression, delusions tend to be more of mood congruent with specific themed on depression, themed on guilt, nihilism, related to decay or degeneration of the body, versus persecutory and referential delusions in primary psychosis. And again, mania will also tend to have mood congruent psychotic symptoms. Schizoaffective can have mood incongruent delusions, and this is a classical debate and discussion whether we need to consider mood disorders and psychosis across the spectrum, which is applicable for elderly as well. Delusional disorders have received quite less of importance in older age, even though the increase in incidence and prevalence has been seen over years. Specifically, delusional parasitosis and misidentification. The paper by Dr. Naresh Nibnani in Indian Journal of Geriatric Mental Health discusses delusion disorders in details and cautions about the use of pimozide, which is quite common in specifically in delusional disorders and delusional parasitosis. And not to forget that a lot of medications, specifically weight reduction, amphetamines, dopaminergic drugs, stimulants, anticholinergics used for Parkinson's, corticosteroids, number of antimalarials, antituberculous agents, fluoroquinolones, tetracyclines, and immunomodulators have the risk to predispose to psychosis even at much lower doses in older adults. And finally, medical illness, a lot of systemic illness, which can involve neurological, infectious, metabolic, and endocrine, which can be remembered with the mnemonic MIND, which include vitamin B12 deficiencies, various neuroinfections, infection by arbovirus, which includes, and infection by the SARS viruses, which includes the ongoing COVID. Finally, Parkinson's, head injury leading to subdural hematoma, and a myriad of endocrine possibilities. Important to remember that many of these medical conditions might remain latent, and psychotic presentation might be the first presentation, which leads to the diagnosis of medical illness only if you dig enough for getting the other causes. And mostly, they might resemble paranoid schizophrenia, but the delusions are often non-systematized. And finally, this is another good review that I was mentioning by Dr. Tampi et al., which provides this very useful flowchart for the clinicians, where you assess, like you assess young onset psychosis for past psychiatric history. You conduct a medical and neurological workup, which again includes history first, clinical examination second for neurological signs and symptoms for sensory loss, and only then the lab investigations. Assess comorbidity, polypharmacy, and substance use. Assess for cognitive impairment. And it suggests that it is better to consider primary psychosis only after excluding these factors, because most often than ever, 60 to 80% you will get something else contributing to it. And if at all it's a primary psychosis, caution needs to be exercised while dealing with the medication doses. Take home points: very late onset schizophrenia and schizophrenia fall among one of the common causes of late life psychosis, typically more in females, more of positive symptoms, less personality involvement, earlier remission in akin with the traditional concept of paraphrenia. Monitoring is important. Antipsychotic dose and duration as to how long you need to treat needs to be, besides the other factors guiding antipsychotic choice of antipsychotic, these factors need to have special importance in the elderly. If possible, if it's a first episode and if remitted with a lower dose, it's better to continue the same lower dose.